What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out every single week. Going to start in the Premier League, spend most of my time in the Premier League. Manchester City get past Crystal Palace on a late penalty. That's always been a tricky fixture for Manchester City for whatever reason. They do survive. Not going to spend too much time on that one. Arsenal were excellent against Fulham. There isn't that much more that needs to be said there. It could have been 4-0 by halftime. They got the 3 goals, saw it out comfortably. So your situation is Arsenal are still up 5 points, and Manchester City are up 5 goals in the goal difference department. I bring this up because Arsenal's 3-goal win is now sort of brought this within the realm of possibility where Arsenal could catch Manchester City in goal difference. And that just gives you that extra cushion where Manchester City then have to jump you in points, not just catch you. You would expect City to have that tiebreaker. But what happened this weekend obviously helps Arsenal in that category, so I wanted to bring that up as well. I want to spend most of my time talking about 2 things, the first of which is this Liverpool game, the come off of the dismantling of Manchester United, and then get shut out at Bournemouth, lose as Philip Billing scores another goal against a Big Six club in this very strange series of events that has happened for both Liverpool and Bournemouth. And ultimately, you can no longer have, if you even had faith in Liverpool's ability to be consistent before this game, that is now gone. They obviously haven't shown it all season, but the question was this Manchester United game a turning point? Can they put together a really solid run to end the season? And at least to a certain extent, I bought the answer is yes. I certainly consider them the favorites for top 4. I still feel that way, but that has a lot more to do with the teams they're competing with than Liverpool. But it's abundantly clear at this point. There is no run coming. It is the same thing I've been talking about with Manchester City. They don't win 10 games in a row this season, particularly in the Premier League. They just don't. And Liverpool are going to have these ups. They're going to have these downs. They've been really bad on the road, which just screams dropped points that you shouldn't drop and screams I can't trust you from a finishing top 4 standpoint. And like I said after that Manchester United game, the only reason Liverpool are even in this top 4 conversation is because nobody has actually taken control of it. Spurs helped themselves by taking care of Nottingham Forest this weekend. Newcastle also stay in the mix by beating Wolves. Brighton come away with a point. They're very much in this conversation. There just isn't anything surprising about Liverpool losing this game other than it shouldn't have happened. They have struggled in these kind of games all season. They have been inconsistent all season. And we collectively, as the soccer society, if you will, do this thing where we take one result and we start making it a referendum, and we either go too far in one direction or too far in the other direction. And we were guilty of it again here with Liverpool. They are who they are. We're 2/3 of the way through the season. This isn't changing. They can beat Manchester United 7-0, and then they can go lose to Bournemouth 1-0 after beating them 9-0 the first time. I still think they're going to finish 4th. But not because they're going to win, 10 games or go unbeaten the rest of the season. I just think they're going to end up doing just enough to get past Tottenham. The other thing I want to spend a couple minutes focusing on, I'm trying to keep this video pretty short, is this relegation battle. There are 5 points between Crystal Palace in 12th and Southampton in dead last. 5 points. And we're talking to, 12, 13 games left for most teams. Your bottom 9 right now are as follows. Crystal Palace, Wolves, Nottingham Forest, Everton, Leicester City, West Ham, and then your 3 in the relegation zone, Bournemouth, Leeds, Southampton. Bournemouth jumped out of the relegation zone and then fell back in based on results. Everton got out of the relegation zone with their win. And so 2 things here. One, Everton went from being the team in the most trouble in the Premier League to one of these 9 teams that I feel the most confident about. Part of it is Sean Dyche. Part of it is the fact that they're getting results. And part of the fact is they just need to be better than 3 of these teams. And they are. That is why you hire somebody who gets the most out of their players. This conversation has changed dramatically for Everton. And not just because of Everton, but also because of what's happening to some of these other teams. So the other thing, the second part of this, go look at these teams and really think about this for a second. Crystal Palace have been in the Premier League for a while now. Very established Premier League club, top half of the table. Yes, they had the Frank de Boer debacle, but by and large, mid-table team, not usually in the relegation conversation. Wolves, what was it, 3 seasons ago? They played in the Europa League after qualifying for it the season before that. Nottingham Forest, obviously just came up, spent all of this money, completely rebuilt their team. They're not behaving like a team that's built to go back down. Everton, don't need to talk about the historical consequences of Everton getting relegated. Leicester, semi-finalists in the European competition last season. Financial issues, which is why they didn't sign anybody until the very end of the summer transfer window. You've got players who, if you end up getting relegated, you're going to have to sort of rebuild this thing from scratch. Because you might be losing your James Madisons of the world anyway. And also, that squad has no business getting relegated. That is a team with Yuri Tillmans, with James Madison, with Harvey Barnes. They just have no business getting relegated, but here they are because all of the defensive issues have come back. And they didn't take their chances against Chelsea. West Ham, again, European semifinalists last season, spent all of this money to try and propel themselves from mid-table to, the team outside of the Big Six, which is also where Leicester were recently. West Ham are not built to go down. Southampton is kind of at a point with all of these young players they bought where they are built to go down. It might not be the worst thing in the world. But and Bournemouth, same thing. They didn't come in and overextend themselves the way Nottingham Forest did. If they stay up, great, but it's not the end of the world if they go back down. And then your last team in this conversation is Leeds. You got some really tough questions there as well in terms of not only your manager moving forward, but the fact that half of your team is very much Premier League caliber. You have the consequences for the U.S. men's national team if they get relegated, because Tyler Adams has no business playing on a championship team. Nor does Weston McKennie, which is part of my concern about this whole thing from the beginning. But you also have a defense that is championship caliber. But they have been trying. Again, from a club standpoint, they are not supposed to be avoiding relegation. It is where they are, and it's where they were last season too. So it's the reality of the situation. But they're supposed to be trying to push top half of the table and to get themselves into Europe. These are not just a collection of clubs. These are, especially between Wolves, West Ham, and Leicester. And then you throw Everton in terms of size and history and all of that. 4 of the biggest / most successful clubs recently outside of the top 6. And now, Newcastle have made it 7 if you want to approach it that way. But we're to a point where if you throw Leeds, because of its Leeds, West Ham, Leicester, Everton, and if you want to include Wolves as well, but I don't even think you need to go there. Odds are at least one of those teams is getting relegated. So it's not just that you have this 5-point gap between 12th and 20th and that there are 9 teams who do not feel safe at all. It's also the story of who these teams are. It's, Southampton trying to make this escape. It's Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest trying to survive their first season in the Premier League. And it's their competition, which is a bunch of well-established Premier League clubs, clubs that have had recent success for the most part, clubs that have been in European competitions. And the final part of this is pertaining to Leicester and West Ham. And I guess you could throw Crystal Palace in there as well, should something. I mean, they can't get a shot on target right now. If they continue to slide and they're in the relegation zone with 5 games left or something, or 8 games left, they also could get into this conversation of, is there another managerial change coming? That's Patrick Vieira, Brendan Rodgers, and David Moyes. Again, not your typical manager who gets a team promoted, they struggle, fear of getting relegated so they get sacked, or, Jesse Marsh, he saves him the first time but doesn't do any better the second time around, so they fire him. Southampton have churned through managers this season. Everton made their change. Wolves made their change. Most of these teams are kind of past it. Bournemouth also made their change. Most of these teams are past that point in the cycle. But there are 3 here, and 2 who are squarely in the relegation conversation. Crystal Palace at least have a cushion, and I think are not going to ultimately get dragged into this too severely. But at what point does it become too much for West Ham and Leicester because you just can't afford to get relegated? It doesn't matter who you've got as options. It doesn't matter how many games are left. You just feel like you need to make a change. Because we're getting pretty close to that with the way they're looking. And maybe they rally in the next couple weeks and this looks a little bit different. But this is setting up to be, both from a number of teams involved standpoint and a historical consequence standpoint, as fascinating as a relegation battle as we have ever seen in the Premier League. So I wanted to take some time to kind of lay that all out, because to me, maybe Manchester City make this really, really interesting and it goes down to the final day. At this point, I still think Arsenal are going to need to get a point on the final day or be able to clinch it the game before or something like that. They're not going to win by 10 points. But I need to see more from City for me to, or to Arsenal to start stumbling again, for me to be locked in to the title race the way I am this relegation battle. Top 4 could be very interesting. You just don't know what to expect with any of those teams week to week. So that's kind of its own strange thing. But the longer we get into the season, the fewer games that are left, the more and more my attention is turning to this relegation battle. Because you just don't see things like this. And it's not like this has started to get... Everton have improved. But it's not like you've gotten to this point where all of these teams that you don't expect to be in the relegation battle have really turned it around. Leicester turned it around and then fell apart again. West Ham had a nice stretch and then fell apart again. They are here planted near the bottom of the table and could very well get relegated. They're not reeling off, 7 wins here. So this is setting up. The title race is certainly still interesting. Captivating top 4 race. Thrilling relegation battle. This is setting up to be a phenomenal end to the Premier League season. Last thing I do want to mention, Borussia Dortmund dropped points against Schalke. Bayern take care of business, so Bayern are back with a little bit of a cushion in the Bundesliga. I feel the same way about this Dortmund game I do about the CONCACAF Champions League first legs on the road. You just can't quantify the difficulties that come with certain sets of circumstances. For Dortmund, it's this rivalry game. For CONCACAF Champions League, it's the field the Philadelphia Union played on. It's having to travel, just CONCACAF happening. You got to give some grace. Yes, it's a disappointing result. It's not the end of the world. Could it ultimately determine the title? Sure. But they were going to have to get something out of that Bayern game anyway. Do they probably need a win now instead of a draw? Yes. But if they win that game, the league is theirs to lose. Getting a point was very helpful. Now, you blew 2 leads to do it. If it was a different game without all of the history and the rivalry, I would be more concerned. Sometimes you just got to accept that there are difficult environments that you can't expect things to go the way that they should. It just is how it works sometimes. Rivalry games are like that. Road games in CONCACAF are like that. You got to take the whole context of the situation into consideration and not just go say, Dortmund's playing the worst team in the league, they should win. The U.S. is playing El Salvador, they should win. That's not how it works with all of the difficulties that come with games like this. So Dortmund's still in it. Obviously disappointing. You take a step back. I still don't think this is ultimately what's going to determine it. It's that Bayern game. If they win it, they very well could go on and win the league. If they lose it, it's probably done right there. You hurt yourself, but you can bandage it up and keep going. This is not quite as big of a deal as some people I feel like are making it out to be. That is all for the weekend roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.